Boycott American. Come with me. Let me show you how you do that. So you pick up a product right here.
Canada, our lifelong friend now casting a shadow 9 times deeper than we expected, quietly pulling the thread that's unraveling America's biggest restaurant names. Applebee's has vanished from over 400 neighborhoods. Red Lobster has dimmed the lights in 120 locations, and Dunkin' more than 500 shops have closed along the border states in just 2 years. The collapse isn't just on the news, but in the meals we grew up with, the comfort food we've turned to for decades. All are vanishing without warning. Every time Canadians pull away, another familiar meal disappears here at home. Could that national breakup really bring down so many American giants, and if other nations start doing the same, what happens next to the places we thought would always be here? This is the Downturn with investigations into break time abuse in Georgia, and today, we uncover 15 U.S. fast food chains mass boycotted by Canadians in 2025. Stay with us, because number 3 will make you feel sad about the good old days that never come back again. Number 1, Applebee's. Who would have thought that a country barely 1/10 the size of the United States could quietly pull the thread that unravels one of America's most affordable meals? And yet, that's exactly what's happening now. Canada, once a loyal weekend partner in cross-border dining, has turned its back on Applebee's, forcing it to face a dark future ahead. That might sound hard to believe, because through generations, Applebee's was never just a restaurant. For millions of working-class Americans, especially from the late 1990s through the early 2000s, it was the second dining room, a place where birthdays were celebrated, work weeks were washed away with half-price appetizers, and a full family dinner could still cost under $40. At its peak, Applebee's had more than 2,000 locations spread across the country, from quiet southern towns to bustling Midwest suburbs. But it wasn't only Americans filling the booths. Each weekend, thousands of Canadians crossed the border, loaded up on Walmart groceries, and capped off the trip with dinner at Applebee's in states like New York, Michigan, and Washington. Canadian visitors made up as much as 30% of weekend revenue, according to a 2018 Technomic report. That reliable flow kept border franchises alive, and we all thought it would be unstoppable. But by late 2024, Applebee's had dwindled to just 1,586 locations nationwide, which means over 400 fewer than it had in 2015, and the worst may still be ahead. In an early 2025 leak, internal forecasts revealed that many northern towns may lose their only Applebee's by year's end, driven almost entirely by a collapse in Canadian foot traffic. What caused this quiet rejection? It wasn't just only high gas prices or the weak Canadian dollar, though both played a role. The final blow came from a breach of trust that Applebee's never wanted you to know, and also wanted to bury it forever. In 2022, a private email from a regional Applebee's executive was leaked, suggesting that rising inflation would be good for business because it would force desperate people to accept low-wage jobs. The message rippled across Canadian news and social media. As a matter of fact, a country that deeply values labor dignity decided to walk away. And following them is the quiet fall down of one of the biggest American restaurant chains. And now, that absence is being felt deeply. Longtime servers, many with 10, 15, even 20 years under their belt, found themselves unemployed overnight. In small towns where Applebee's was the only sit-down option, families have nowhere left to gather without driving miles. Elderly couples who used to share Sunday dinners now feel isolated at home. Parents juggling 2 or 3 jobs lost an affordable way to give their kids a real meal outside the microwave. Meanwhile, Canadian chains like Swiss Chalet and Boston Pizza have expanded their reach and quietly taken Applebee's place in Canadian hearts. They offer reliable pricing, consistent quality, and something Applebee's lost: public trust. Maybe not every Canadian meant to abandon the brand, but when enough people silently choose elsewhere, the outcome is the same. What do we do when our old friends don't return? What's your prediction about the US and Canada breakup? Keep watching, because number 2 brings sadness even deeper. Number 2, KFC. What happens when even a bucket of fried chicken, once the cheapest way to bring joy to your family, now suddenly becomes too expensive to bring home in 2023. A devastating report from Consumer Reports sent a jolt across North America. It revealed that several industrial fried chicken products contain trace amounts of harmful chemicals, and multiple samples from KFC were among the culprits. The data ignited outrage in Canada, especially among younger consumers. On TikTok and Reddit, the hashtags spread like wildfire. What began as confusion quickly turned into a widespread boycott within just weeks. Customer traffic collapsed across provinces like Alberta and Manitoba, and for the first time in decades, Canadians no longer saw KFC as trustworthy. No matter how large or beloved the brand once was, memories couldn't help. Even when people used to love it so much till the point in the good old days, KFC had more than 700 restaurants throughout Canada. Because it was more than fast food, but a warm payday dinner, a reward for good grades, or a small celebration on a freezing night. People didn't just eat KFC, they depended on it for decades. But today, dozens of those locations have vanished, with no announcement, no warning, storefronts went dark, and families who relied on a bucket of chicken to feed 3 or 4 mouths were left confused and cut off. Why did this happen? The reasons run deep. Canadian food culture has shifted towards sustainability, transparency, and humane sourcing. Chains like A&W embrace the movement, introducing plant-based options, organic sourcing, and clear nutritional info. KFC, meanwhile, stayed stuck in an older era, clinging to a model built on industrial poultry and nostalgia. That may have worked once, but it doesn't work anymore in 2025. And while Canada walked away, America is falling behind too. That's the very thing I mentioned at the beginning of this part. Because combo meals, once priced around $7 or $8, have ballooned past $12. For many working Americans, that used to cover an entire family's meal. Now, it's a tray of food many can't afford. So what does it mean when one day even KFC becomes unreachable? Many people say we could turn back to our kitchen and cook our own meals, but it can't be applied to everyone, especially those who don't have much free time and also couldn't afford fresh ingredients. Even when you find a way to figure it out, many still consider cooking 3 times a day every day exhausting. So in this situation, what's your most possible solution for you and your family? When a place you trusted disappears without goodbye, it makes you question what's left. If you ever found warmth or joy in a KFC meal, share that memory in the comments. We're all ears. Number 3, IHOP. Once upon a Sunday morning, an IHOP table meant more than just pancakes. It meant 3 generations together. Grandparents with stories, parents sipping coffee, and children giggling with syrup on their fingers for over 65 years. IHOP was woven into the rhythm of American life. The blue roof was a promise of affordability, and the comfort of breakfast made the old-fashioned way. At its height, IHOP operated over 1,600 restaurants across the country, becoming the anchor of affordable mornings in both big cities and small towns. But now, that warmth is fading, beginning quietly in 2022. A subtle but steady disappearance swept through towns that once bustled with cross-border weekenders. In states like Minnesota, North Dakota, and New Hampshire, IHOP locations started vanishing. First 1, then 2, then 60. No headlines, just locked doors and forgotten signs. Behind this collapse lies the vanishing presence of Canadian customers, who once made up 10 to 20% of weekend traffic in these border communities. Have you ever noticed and questioned why they stopped coming? The reasons are many, but they all add up. Egg prices soared by 51% between 2021 and 2023. A simple meal that cost under $8 in 2018 now creeps toward $15 before taxes and tips. For a working-class Canadian family already burdened by rising gas prices, a weak exchange rate, and post-pandemic border restrictions, what was once a comforting brunch turned into an unaffordable outing. But it wasn't just about price, but about where people feel seen. Canadian chains like Cora Breakfast and Lunch and Eggsmart offered friendlier service, cleaner tables, and prices 20 to 25% lower than IHOP. TikTok clips and Reddit posts from 2023 began to expose what Canadians described as watery coffee, rubbery eggs, and a decline in care they found in IHOP. So as a matter of fact, their weekend traditions quietly shifted back home. The jobs falled out. And maybe it's the most heartbreaking because those employees are just normal people who are just trying their hardest to feed their family. Most IHOP staff in rural areas are part-time servers, single moms, students, or older workers. Many were laid off with no notice, no severance. If the silent boycott continues, Dine Brands has warned up to 100 more closures may come by 2026. Combo deals will disappear, prices will climb, and the IHOP that once made breakfast feel sacred may become too expensive to believe in. Today, in Canada, families enjoy their morning meals in bright, local restaurants that feel fresh and sincere. Meanwhile, the familiar blue roofs of IHOP grow quieter. The question isn't just whether Canadians will return, but whether IHOP still offers anything worth crossing a border for. Number 4. Olive Garden. There was a time when a booth at Olive Garden meant celebration, anniversaries, graduations, a Friday night splurge with the family. For millions of middle-class Americans, Olive Garden offered something rare, an affordable escape wrapped in Italian ambiance, with more than 850 locations at its peak. It was the place where unlimited breadsticks felt like a gift, not a gimmick. But in 2025, those booths are emptier, and what's vanishing is a piece of America's shared memory. Quietly walking out the door with Canadian tourists who've chosen not to come back. Between 2015 and 2019, in states like Vermont, Michigan, and New York, internal Dine Brands data showed that as many as 1 in every 4 weekend Olive Garden guests came from Canada. They crossed the border for a familiar setting, a no-surprises menu, and no awkward tipping culture. But by mid-2024, that flow had slowed to a trickle. Locations near the border began shutting down without warning. The spark, a 30% plunge in Canadian traffic, fueled by rising gas prices, a weakening Canadian dollar, and a scandal far more damaging. In early 2023, headlines broke that Gene Lee, the former CEO of Darden Restaurants, had received over $11 million in stock compensation, just as thousands of part-time workers across Olive Garden were being laid off. The backlash in Canada was immediate and intense. A viral Twitter trend, Drop Darden, spread across the country. Reddit Canada lit up with users slamming the company's greed, its tone-deaf leadership, and the poor quality of food served by overworked, underpaid staff. For many Canadians, that was the last straw. They stopped coming. The consequences are painfully visible in American towns. Retirees lost their weekly gathering spot. Students looking for weekend hours found the doors locked. Seniors on fixed incomes who once relied on server tips to stretch each month now face empty job boards. In the void, Canadian brands like Eastside Mario's and Moxie's have stepped in. Their prices are 20 to 25% lower, their atmosphere modern, their service local and sincere. One Canadian Redditor put it bluntly, "Why drive 3 hours for reheated ravioli when I can walk to the corner and support my neighbor Dine Brands?" Now warns that up to 80 more US locations may shut down by the end of 2025 if Canada's quiet boycott continues. And if the UK, Australia, or other post-trade shift nations follow suit, Olive Garden's international presence could disappear before 2026. So as the breadsticks go cold and the booths stay silent, we're not just losing a restaurant. We're watching the slow erasure of something that once brought us together. Number 5, McDonald's. What if the fall of McDonald's didn't come from its enemies, but from the silent retreat of one of its closest friends, Canada? In 2024, McDonald's revenue dropped by 19% in Quebec, with similar losses in Ontario. Once a symbol of American comfort, with over 1,400 locations across Canada, McDonald's was more than food, it was part of daily life. Childhood road trips, late-night stops, family meals. But now, the golden arches are fading into the background. Border town restaurants sit half empty. The lights are still on, but the warmth is gone. Why post-COVID spending caution, a weak Canadian dollar, and skyrocketing gas and grocery costs hit hard, but even deeper. Cultural shifts are reshaping choices. Movements like Stop Eating Ultra-Processed Food have turned McDonald's into a target, especially among Canadian Gen Z. The rejection isn't loud, it's distant, quiet, and personal. For Americans near the border, the impact is real. Without Canadian foot traffic, local McDonald's close. For working families, students, and retirees, that means lost jobs, lost gathering spaces, and no more affordable breakfast. When even McDonald's is quietly abandoned, we're left asking what trusted parts of life might vanish next. Number 6, Dunkin'. What happens when your morning coffee no longer waits for you? When even the smallest comfort disappears without a sound for decades? Dunkin' was the heartbeat of the early American morning. A warm $2 coffee, a plastic chair by the window, the soft hum of neighbors starting their day. It welcomed truckers, nurses, teachers, retirees, everyone. But now, the rhythm is breaking. Between 2022 and 2024, foot traffic at Dunkin' stores near the US-Canada border dropped by up to 25%. Towns in Vermont, New Hampshire, and upstate New York felt it first. Canadian customers stopped coming. No protest, no drama, just absence. Gas prices climbed, the Canadian dollar weakened, and Gen Z turned to craft espresso and boutique cafes. Dunkin' didn't adapt and got left behind. In rural America, closures are spreading. Older workers and immigrants lose hours. Community tables sit empty. The familiar morning ritual replaced with silence and homemade coffee. One Vermont Dunkin' closed overnight. No notice. Just a bricked-up window where laughter used to live. This wasn't a war, it was a quiet goodbye, and in losing it, we lost a part of our mornings and maybe a piece of ourselves. Number 7, Subway, for 2 decades. We believe Subway was the better choice. A healthier meal, a cleaner option, a sandwich that showed we cared. But between 2020 and 2024, over 1,000 Subway stores quietly closed across North America. In Canada, revenue collapsed in provinces like British Columbia and Quebec. Cross-border visits to U.S. Subway locations dropped by nearly 30%. There was no scandal, no outcry, just a quiet unraveling. Doubts about the freshness. Suspicion that Eat Fresh was just marketing. And while Subway stood still, Canadian brands like Freshii and Tim Hortons offered local, organic, trusted alternatives. So Canada walked away silently. Now, the impact is personal. Elderly Americans who relied on a light. Affordable lunch find empty storefronts. In working-class towns, where Subway was once the only healthy meal option, closures are rising. The sandwiches remain, but the meaning is gone. One plaza in Vermont says it all. The lights are off. The chairs are stacked. Nothing's broken, but it's over. When even a sandwich shop loses our trust. What else are we slowly letting go of without saying a word? Number 8. Burger King. Burger King once stood for choice. Have it your way meant more than toppings, it meant the working class still had a say. At its peak, over 11,000 locations served more than 11 million people daily. But by 2023, that promise faded. Over 400 US stores closed. In Canada, malls in Ontario and Alberta quietly replaced Burger King with A&W and Harvey's brands seen as cleaner. More local, more now. The reasons are visible. Cross-border trips vanished as gas prices soared and sentiment cooled. Canadians rejected greasy meals and static menus. Burger King stayed stuck in the past, no clean labels, no app ordering, no evolution. While America clung to nostalgia, Canada moved on. The pain lands hardest on the forgotten. Seniors who use paper coupons, workers needing one hot, simple sandwich late at night. Towns where Burger King was the only spot open after 9. In Kansas, one location still shows the crown, but inside, the fryer's cold, the window's cracked, the choice is gone. And when even the Whopper disappears. Maybe the real loss isn't fast food, but the quiet truth that those who relied on it no longer feel seen. Number 9. Red Lobster. Red Lobster was once the place we saved for special days, anniversaries, birthdays, milestones that deserved more than drive-through food. It felt like luxury we could reach. With over 700 locations worldwide, it welcomed families across income levels. In northern US states, cross-border Canadian diners helped fuel the experience, making up over 12% of weekend traffic by 2015. But in May 2024, Red Lobster filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy after reporting nearly $11 million in losses for one quarter. Within 6 months, 99 stores had closed, many in places where generations once gathered around a seafood platter. The decline was quiet. Fewer tourists, rising costs, a weakening Canadian dollar. Then came the scandal. In 2023, the Endless Shrimp campaign approved by the CEO drove massive losses. Canadian media mocked it as a buffet built on a black hole. Now the fallout is real. Thousands of workers, many single moms and retirees were left behind. In towns like Michigan and Vermont, Red Lobster didn't just vanish, it left behind silence. And maybe the worst part? That empty plate reminds us even tradition can be forgotten when no one is watching. Number 10. Buffalo Wild Wings. Buffalo Wild Wings. With over 1,200 locations, it brought game day to life in towns across Michigan, New York, and beyond. Super Bowl seats were booked a week ahead. UFC nights turned tables into cheering crowds. And in border cities, Canadians crossed over for wings, beer, and energy. But between 2021 and 2024, the roar faded. Over 100 stores closed, including in cities like Buffalo and Spokane. Inspire Brands' 2023 report showed border locations saw an 11% revenue drop. Worse, Canadian visits fell 35%. Why wings that cost 89 cents now go for $1.79. Beer prices surged post-pandemic. Canada's own sports bars, the Canadian Brew House, Boston Pizza offered the same buzz, closer and cheaper. Then came the backlash. A 2023 TikTok showed staff in Ohio ignoring Asian customers. The video sparked outrage, especially in Canada's diverse communities. Complaints of dirty kitchens and poor service followed. Now, the screens are still on, but the crowds are gone. Weekend workers lost income, and the shared magic of game night fading fast. Number 11, the Cheesecake Factory. There was a time when the Cheesecake Factory felt like a celebration in every Bite Velvet booths, towering desserts, and menus thicker than novels. For Canadians, it was part of the trip. In cities like Buffalo and Burlington, nearly 18% of diners came from across the border, spending over $60 per visit. But by 2024, the glow faded. Revenue at border locations dropped 12%. Vacancy rates rose 25%. On TikTok, Canadians filmed quiet dining rooms, calling them museums of forgotten celebrations. Staff echoed the silence some hours passed with no orders at all. Why Canadian chains like Moxie's and Jack Astor's now offer modern design and full bars for 15 to 20% less. And after US-Canada trade tensions, many simply chose homegrown brands not just for price, but out of principle. Then came scandal. In 2022, the Cheesecake Factory was fined for hiding $150 million in pandemic losses. Reports of unpaid overtime and staff cuts followed. Canadians noticed. Now, birthdays happen elsewhere. Seniors miss their favorite booth. Workers lose weekend shifts. And when even dessert disappears, what sweetness of America still remains number 12? TGI Fridays. Stepping into a TGI Fridays used to feel like walking into celebration, blinking neon signs, sizzling plates, and cocktails tall enough to toast a whole table. Canadians made it a part of every long weekend road trip. Cities like Buffalo and Seattle counted on them for nearly a fifth of Friday's weekend traffic at the brand's height, when it ran more than 900 locations worldwide. But in 2024, that glow is gone. Only about 270 US stores remain, a steep fall from over 700 in 2010. Every Canadian location closed in 2023. The chain couldn't keep up with rising rent, wages, or customer expectations. A Restaurants Canada survey revealed 74% of Canadians under 45 called it overpriced fast food. Reddit threads echoed the shift. I used to visit Buffalo's Fridays every long weekend. It's gone now and I don't miss it. While Earl's, Moxie's, and the Rec Room modernized, Fridays stayed frozen in the early 2000s, under Tri-Artisan Capital advisors. It also faced backlash after franchise sales were tied to misleading financial reports. Now, border towns are left with shuttered doors, empty booths, and unemployed weekend staff, and with Friday's charm fading. What other American traditions might quietly be next? Number 13. Starbucks. No headlines, no protest, just empty chairs and quiet exits. Starbucks, once the universal symbol of modern life, is vanishing where it mattered most. Since 2020, over 400 North American stores have closed. In Canada alone, 144 shuttered in 2023. Border cities like Vancouver, Detroit, and Buffalo were hit hard. These weren't just coffee shops, they were gathering points for both nations, but the crowd is gone. Gen Z Canadians now favor eco-conscious indie cafes. Gas prices and a weak Canadian dollar keep travelers local. For middle-aged Americans, choosing between meds and groceries makes a $6 latte feel selfish. The Siren Cup once promised belonging. Now, it feels out of reach. Office workers brew at home. Retirees glance at the menu, then walk away. The cafes echo with silence. One Robson Street location in Vancouver stands dark and hollow. No jazz, no baristas. Just a logo fading from memory. Starbucks wasn't just American, it was shared. Its quiet rejection now feels like distance between neighbors. Not anger, but indifference. And maybe that's the most unsettling part, losing not the coffee, but the feeling we were still connected. Number 14, Denny's. Denny's used to be where the lights never went out, serving night shift workers, families after church, and travelers chasing comfort on long drives. By 2018, it had over 1,700 US locations, many near the Canadian border. In towns like Niagara Falls and Seattle, Canadians waited in line for pancakes and bottomless coffee. But between 2020 and 2024, more than 150 Denny's restaurants closed, mostly in border states once crowded with cross-border diners. At some locations, breakfast traffic dropped by 27%. The iconic Grand Slam, once $6.99, now costs over $13, too much for many. Trust cracked in 2022, when a viral video from Maine showed unsanitary kitchens and undercooked meals. In Canada, backlash spread fast. The image of Denny's shifted from comfort to carelessness. Now, retirees and truckers in places like Bellingham and Plattsburgh find dark windows where light once shone. Workers, many single parents, lost overnight jobs with nowhere else to turn. Denny's isn't just closing, it's vanishing from the rhythm of daily life. And when even the always open diner disappears, what's left for the ones who never stopped needing it? Number 15, Salt Bay. What once shimmered with gold and fame now echoes with silence. Nusser-et, the luxury steakhouse empire built by viral icon Salt Bae, once drew Canadian tourists to Las Vegas, Miami, and Beverly Hills. A single meal costing over $275 per person was part of the spectacle. Gold-coated tomahawk steaks flooded Instagram. For many, it was worth it for the photo, the story, the status. But between 2022 and 2024, the glow faded. Bloomberg reported a 22% revenue drop at the Las Vegas branch, driven largely by disappearing Canadian guests. TikToks showing $1,000 bills and 40-minute waits went viral, but not with admiration. The mood shifted from envy to discomfort. Culturally, Canadians turned away from flash. After Salt Bae interrupted the 2022 World Cup final for a forced photo with Messi, backlash in Canadian media was swift. It felt arrogant, out of touch. Then came worse. A 2023 New York Times investigation revealed worker abuses, unpaid hours, confiscated passports, long shifts. In Canada, the brand was relabeled luxury, built on exploitation. Staff cuts followed. Older guests walked away. Youth jobs near border cities disappeared. In 2025, it's not just storefronts closing, it's something deeper, something heavier. It's the fading heartbeat of Sunday mornings at IHOP, the hush where laughter used to echo inside Red Lobster booths, the slow vanishing of places that once felt like home. What we're really losing is not a meal or a menu, it's the comfort of knowing exactly where to go when life got too hard to cook. And then, almost quietly, Canada, once the neighbor who always showed up, began to turn away. No press conferences, no headlines, just a subtle shift. Fewer tourists, fewer trade trucks, fewer reasons for chains to keep their lights on this side of the border. The silence grew louder. If other countries do the same, what's left for the towns built around these familiar signs? What happens when the last booth goes empty and the last affordable cup of coffee disappears? This isn't just economic decline, it's cultural erosion, the unraveling of the small, ordinary joys that held our days together. And now we ask ourselves, was this collapse sudden? Or did it begin with the first quiet goodbye we chose not to notice?